Hello YouTube, it's the Lonely Wolf again, and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today I'm going to be doing part two of my analysis of the Joker movie. Alright, so hopefully if you want to catch up with what I've been talking about and the nature of my discourse, then perhaps you might want to look at part one, which will be in my channel. Okay, so you'll see the first one. So this one will be called part two. Okay, so in this particular video, so I'll move away from the critique of the film itself and sort of look at where it fits in with other films and talk about some of the social things. So I guess the first thing I really want to get out of the way is to talk about, I guess, some of the comments on Twitter, and I guess it's a political discussion as well. So it seems like, okay, the so-called, I guess they call them the woke scolds, is a word they use. I try not to use that word. It seems to be a nonsensical kind of fuzz word that people use. So there's obviously criticisms about that. So there's often conversations about, patriarchy, white privilege, male entitlement, incel-fueled violence, white nationalism, the Trump era, etc., etc., etc. So that seems to be a tool of analysis that some people are using. Okay. Now, I think it's important that we all have freedom of expression. So I'm a very big advocate for free speech. So at the end of the day, does it really matter that something that I've just critiqued, so I consider, an amazing work of art, something that I really, really admire. So just about every frame of that film had me in awe. I was thinking, wow, look at this. Wow, look at that. So does it really bother me? And I had to think about this. Does it really bother me that there are certain, I guess, activists, and they make reviews of the film and they talk about they've got this particular lens they look at. Okay, so usually it might have started with, okay, it talks about the white male. So a focus on this kind of identitarianism. Does that really bother me? At the end of the day, I'm going to say no. Because I've always advocated for free speech. So I think that everyone's entitled to do things. And it also comes to art as well. So art is such a subjective medium that I think we're all entitled to have our interpretations. And I guess we don't have to agree with them. We don't have to respect the authors who make those particular things. But at the same time, they're going to be there. And is it really worth getting worked up and being worried about that? I don't think so. It doesn't really matter. The time where I do have a problem with that is when people are not going to respect somebody else's artistic interpretation. So if you're going to come to my video and say, oh, because you like this movie, that makes you a misogynist, it makes you a Trump supporter, it makes you this and that, then we're going to have a bit of a problem. Okay, I'm probably going to push back against that. But, if they have their opinion over here, I have my opinion over there, they have their opinion over there, then is it really going to be the end of the world? I'm getting to the stage now where I don't really engage in that sort of thing. I mean, sometimes it's a bit of a lolcow when I read some of the comments and some of the sort of conclusions that I think, because I guess I disagree with them that much. But is it really a big deal? The answer is no. So I'm just going to show you an example of how bad it is. Okay, so this is Jonathan McIntosh. Okay, if you know that full Macintosh, I mean, this is a dude that I really dislike. Okay, I dislike his opinions for a lot of reasons. I think he takes it a step further. There's kind of an implication in his tweets and in his work that there's a certain sense of superiority, which is kind of unearned. Okay, I really don't like that sort of thing. And I'm going to be honest, some of these male progressives, male feminists, they're a lot more unreasonable than the women who are part of those movements. That's just an overall trend that I found. But anyway, I'm just going to read what it says. Okay, so IndieWire reports that the Joker wins the Venice Film Festival Golden Lion, sort of thing like that. Okay, and then his response to this. This is Jonathan McIntosh. The film world loves movies that rationalize men's violence. And it's like, it seems so preachy and so bitter and so smug. Okay, so that's one of the examples of something that I don't like. It's hard to ignore that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, that's going to have to be his problem. I mean, I don't really want to talk about it too much. Okay, first of all, I don't think the film is rationalizing somebody's violence. I mean, I think it's possible. As I spoke before in my previous videos, it's ambivalence. Okay, sometimes we can have two or more thoughts in our head that can coexist together. And yes, okay, it can be uncomfortable, but it often does happen. Okay, ambivalence is a thing. So, for example, I was watching the film and there's parts of the narrative where I sympathize with this person. Okay, so they fleshed out this character. I sympathize with all the struggles that he went through. But at the same time, I'm also disgusted by the things that he did and how far he went. Okay, so there's two things that are existing together. It's no sort of black and white picture saying either we hate this violence or we're going to justify it saying, oh, those people had it coming. It doesn't really think that way. Usually our thoughts don't operate that way. Usually there's a lot of ambivalence. There's usually two or more thoughts that are going through our head at the same time, and that's really a natural part of the human thinking process. I think that I'm not a fan of the black and white type thinking. So, as I said before, this particular style of analysis where they're using the lens of sociology, gender studies, all those sort of things. Okay, yes, okay, if that's what they want to do, that's the lens they've chosen, then go for it. Okay, all power to you. But as long as, we can mutually respect each other, as long as, my interpretation, my appreciation doesn't get in the way. So we sort of stay in our own lanes, and I think we can get along okay. But as I said before, I'm not going to agree with it, but at the same time, I'm not going to spend a lot of energy in sort of going against that or being upset about those sort of things, because they're just opinions. They're not necessarily prohibitions, they're just opinions. And at the end of the day, I mean, for people who feel angry about those sort of comments, you've got to realize that the comments that are negative are usually going to fuel the publicity for the film anyway. So it's actually good for the fans of the franchise. Okay, whereas me, this was just a standalone experience. I've never really watched the other Batman sort of movies, except for the 90s. And I haven't really watched the DC or the Marvel universe. I've watched very few of their films. Okay, so for me, this was a standalone experience. Probably because it was a deviation from that, because I really do like my complicated... I love my character dramas. I love my artsy films. And for me, as I explained in my previous video, this is kind of a homage to a lot of the movies that I really enjoyed growing up. Now, another argument I really want to make is that I see the word white male being used to describe this character, and it's kind of in a very condescending way, as if to say, oh great, another movie about white men. I'm going to argue a point here. Okay, so you may agree with me, you may disagree with me. The fact is that I sort of see a certain influence from other films in which there was a woman who went through the same sort of experiences. So I'm just going to name a couple of movies that are in my DVD collection that I could feel reverberating throughout the Joker film. So sometimes that's why I'm not really a fan of the analysis that focuses on a surface level of, I guess, the race and gender of the character, because I think that there are some experiences that go beyond that. Okay, we could be talking about anybody. You could even have a woman in this role, and it still would have worked. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Now, I guess the other reason why I'm trying not to go too hard on some of these critics who use the social justice cause, they're activists or whatever, I try not to be too hard on those, because as you saw in my last review, so if you watch that, you're probably going to be a bit put back, because I'm equally guilty of being a little bit myopic. So I talked in great detail about a lot of these things in the film. So I talked about the framing, I talked about the cinema angles, I even talked about the fucking wallpaper patterns and drawing a metaphor from that. Okay, so some of us are myopic. Okay, we've got our pet interests. Okay, what I want to start talking about is the era of cinema that I was talking about, some of the influences. Alright, so I'm going to share with you my DVD collection. So this is Getting to Know the Lonely Wolf. Okay, so Vanilla Sky is one of my favourites. I love that. Being John Malkovich, Donnie Darko, Monster, and Requiem for a Dream. Now, I actually want to bring up these two films, Monster and Requiem for a Dream. Okay, the reason I bring these up is because I saw elements of these films that reverberated into the Joker. Okay, there were certain things. Now, they were very, very different experiences, but there's something about it that really carried through these films. Okay, so the first one is, this is a brilliant movie, so Monster, so based on a true story. So Charlize Theron, she won an Academy Award. Up to date, probably my favourite performance from any actor or actress to this date, by Charlize Theron, and directed by Patty Jenkins. So it's sort of based on the true story. So this case, it's a female serial killer. So she has a story of, it's a really devastating story of childhood abuse, okay, followed by being downtrodden by society, becoming a prostitute, and then finally when she's in the car with John, who becomes very, very violent towards her, she snaps, okay, she pulls the gun, and then from that point onwards, something happens. Okay, so we're not sure how much of it is self-defense and how much of it is premeditated murder, but it became a case of a serial killer in Florida. Okay, so it kept going and going, so a downward spiral there. Okay, so I think this film, it has a similar type of vibe that really reverberates through that, but I felt like it was a bit of a gender swap that happened. So it's a very similar message about what happens when society, it sort of gets you down and it keeps pushing you and pushing you and pushing you against the wall, and then suddenly there's a shock when, I guess, when the pushback is sometimes irrational. Okay, it's very combustible. We don't know how to deal with it, and when we see tragedy, sometimes we don't know how to process that, and we're sort of thinking, okay, how much does society have to do with, I guess, the way in which a lot of people feel marginalized and pushed towards the corner? Because I guess the human psyche is very complicated and it's capable of a lot of really awful things, because it's a very combustible thing that when you push somebody against a wall for so long, we don't know what it looks like when there's that pushback that comes there. Okay, now this is a little bit more subtle, so people are probably not going to agree with me on that. Okay, so Requiem for a Dream. So I'm going to mention another actor. So up with Charlize Theron, I'd say that Ellen Burstyn, her performance in this film is, to date, is for me, along with Charlize Theron, probably one of the most outstanding performances that was ever done in cinema history. Okay, it was amazing. And I'll probably say the same thing about Jared Leto, and a few of the other people in this film as well. And, you know, Joaquin Phoenix is probably ranking up there. He's probably one of my favourite actors as well as Christian Bale. Okay, so I've got a list of all these great actors I love. Now, what was interesting about this film, what I saw in common was, I guess it's the exploration of the boundaries between reality and dreams. So I saw a few scenes in this film that kind of, you know, really reverberated for me when I was watching The Joker. So, for example, the main character played by Ellen Burstyn, she's also watching television. So she's watching this kind of game show in which there's this really charismatic host, and, you know, she dreams of being on television, and she thinks that by being on television, you know, she'll be able to be salvaged. So something can be salvaged. She could re-salvage her youth, and she believes the whole world will love her. And so it's a very false kind of sense of hope. And the way in which she holds on to that, it really is part of her downfall, because she becomes addicted to diet pills. Then she starts hallucinating, and the downfall of her character is absolutely tragic. So it's very different from the other two films I'm talking about, so namely Monster and Joker, in that it's not necessarily violent, but it's a particularly self-destructive type of violence that happens. It's the misuse of drugs, and that's the theme in Requiem for a Dream, right? So it's the experience is slightly different, but I guess there's a vibe that I feel through that. So there's probably two scenes that kind of, I think, that made me relate to the Joker a lot, and I thought, wow, I love this era of cinema. It's coming back. Okay, so the first thing that I'm thinking of is one of the fantasy sequences. So Ellen Burstyn, there's a fantasy sequence in which she sees herself on television. So towards the end of the film, when she's at her lowest point, where she's completely lost her mind, okay, in her mind, she's on that television show, the lights are shining on her, and that part of the performance, it's a really key part of the film. And similarly, we see in the Joker, there's a sort of dream that he has in his mind, some sort of longing that he's looking for. So it's a little bit different. So he's longing for some sort of father figure. So when he sees Robert De Niro's character on the screen, he fantasizes himself being on the stage and being hugged. So he's longing for that father figure. And sometimes that fixation upon certain dreams and how misguided some of those things are compared to what is in reality. So that's what I see reverberating. Now, another scene that I found really sort of haunting about the Joker was some of the dancing that was going on, especially when he had his makeup on. So I saw a similar scene in Requiem for a Dream in which so Ellen Burstyn's character had applied a lot of lipstick on. She was wearing a red dress, because for her, the red dress that she was wearing was representing, I guess, some of her fantasies she had. So the recapturing of her youth, a very vivid colour. She dyed her hair red, but then it was starting to fade out because as she became more addicted to the diet pills, she'd sort of neglected her own health. Okay? And she was applying the makeup on. It was very uneven because her judgment had been impaired, and she was sort of dancing around a lot. So I sort of saw that part of it as well. Okay, now this isn't a criticism of the films. Okay, so often we see certain influences. So when it comes to a film, we often see a unique mosaic of some other things. So it consists of the original ideas. Okay, so these are the ideas that the film has. So each film has its own original ideas, but then there's also a bit of a mosaic. So there's a bit of pastiche of something here, something here, something here. So there's a lot of influences. So that's why I enjoy the Stranger Things, because it has an original storyline, but it also has, visually, etc. There's often a homage to things from the past. And that's really what canon is all about. So the reason I like that is because when we talk about literary or film canon, we're talking about what influences what. So the critics aren't the ones who determine what the canon is. Okay, it doesn't matter what some pretentious film critic is going to say. They've got shit to do with that. Okay, the real canon is determined by the artists that came before. So where are the influences coming from? Okay, where are people borrowing influences, and where is it cascading through? So for me, I'm thinking of these films that I used to love. Okay, so it's an era that I absolutely love. It's sort of, that's why I love this film so much, because I can see some of those influences cascading down through the years, okay, into the contemporary cinema. So I'd actually, in conclusion, I think I'd really love to see more of those character study type things, especially when it comes to villains. Now, I think Harley Quinn would be the other character that I'm quite attached to, and the Joker as well. So we've seen the Joker, so it's almost like I'd love to see a film with Harley Quinn. Now, I know that she's in some ensemble piece with the girl power type thing, which is, yeah, that's fine. It's good to see her again, but I want to see her in her own film, just her, because I think that when I watched Suicide Squad, the only other movie that I ever watched, okay, in the superhero genre, it was like everyone else was just background material. That was actually the only part of the film that I enjoyed whenever she was on. There was something about her. And then I think Jared Leto's Joker, something about him as well. Those two characters were the only things that was good about the Suicide Squad. And I dare say that if I watch this other film that they're making with Harley Quinn, it's probably going to be the same thing. It's like I'm probably going to be bored with the other characters and only focused on Harley. So it'd be so interesting if they made a film, like a sort of character psychological study of, this one character, namely Harley Quinn. And obviously you'd have to have the Joker in there somewhere to see that, and maybe the Poison Ivy, so to minimize that. They need to do that. Okay, if you do that, I'll watch it, I promise. Okay, that's enough from me. So you may agree with me, you may disagree with me, but just remember, this is subjective. So people have got different ways of interpreting art, and as much as I agree, I don't like that kind of, I guess they use the word woke type of thing. They call them the woke scolds or whatever, when they sort of, the pearl clutching towards a film or whatever. Now, as long as nobody's calling for the banning of a film, okay, or as long as you're not making a moral judgment saying that you're a bad person because you watched this problematic piece of art or whatever. No, I've got no time for that bullshit, okay? So if people come to me and sort of question my integrity just because I have a different opinion of art versus morality, as I said before, I'm more of that Oscar Wilde type appreciator, whereas I don't see a need. The artist isn't obligated to tell a story that has morality and to have a positive message or whatever, or to show a positive representation of people. It's just they have the license to go wherever the hell they want to go. It's the imagination. So the imagination is something that's very unpredictable, and so I want to see everything out there, no matter how dark it is. I'm interested in seeing it. Okay, so I guess we have a difference of opinion when it comes to how we go about interpreting films. And as I said before, sometimes I can be very myopic in my analysis. So I think that people are probably going to find my first video in which I talked about the visual parts of the Joker, they're going to think that my analysis is really going on a tangent. Like they might actually find it bizarre. So that's the other thing that I'm considering, because I actually paid so much attention to the camera shots that I was talking about the design of the wallpaper, and I was drawing a metaphor from that. Okay, so that's I don't think that's a normal pattern of consumption of film either. Okay, so we've all got our things. So at the end of the day, we should respect each other's opinions. Art is subjective, and so let's enjoy it. Thank you for watching, and if you like what I do, please subscribe to my channel.